They know very well this is not an immortal arrangement or even long-standing. It may only last for 1 or 2 years even. So anyway, for example. So entities in this world are insecure. So naturally, on account of insecurity, they look for immortality. So that immortality can only be found in the Supreme Lord. So Vaidhisalika, Ishvara, he worships Ishvara, knowing that the Supreme Lord is the supreme safety. Only he can award immortality or fearlessness by granting one immortal life. Like this. So out of the 9 forms of devotional service, these 3 are the most important. And of course, of these 3, chanting the holy names, Sankirtan, is paramount. So then, this is indicated by the verse we heard yesterday, Etan nirvidyamananam, Ichchatam akutobhayam, yoginam nipanirnitam, hare namanukirtanam. This is the peerless method for all persons, chanting of the holy name of Krishna. So of these 3, Harinam is considered superlative, the best one. Tava madhye sarvasheshtra nama sankirtan niraparada nam nilepaya premandan. So of the 9 forms of devotional service, 3 are mentioned as paramount. Of those 3, sarvasheshtra, the best one is Nam Sankirtan done without offense. Nam Sankirtan done without offense, the words the gift of Krishna Prema. Understand? So, according to one's taste and capacity, capability, he may take up the process of Pada Sevanam. And we'll hear a little bit. Mostly, Pada Sevanam is anyway going on if you're in devotional life. But one who adheres as a very intense focus to Pada Sevanam, that may or may not be there according to the taste and capacity of the sadhaka. In other words, one may do without Pada Sevanam also, as such. It is not obligatory to do Pada Sevanam as such, as an intense focus on sadhana. But it is obligatory to do Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. You can do without that one. Chandramali Maharaj, he tells us a story of an experience he had when he was in Croatia, I believe, where one Mataji, she had heard you can perfect your life by any one of the angas of devotional service. So she particularly liked Archanam. So she said, I'm going to perfect my life by Archanam. So she wasn't chanting japa, she didn't see. She said, it says clearly, you can perfect your life by any one of the angas. So Maharaj had to try to correct her understanding. It was very difficult though, because she was already invested into a particular concept. Anyway, so you can do without some of the, as such, not that you can do, but you may not adhere to that particular anga exclusively. That is not obligatory. But Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam is obligatory. And even amongst these 3, Sankirtan or Kirtan, Sankirtan is most important. Understand? Simple. So the next point Prabhupada brings out is that one obtains the perfection of remembering when one constantly thinks of the lotus feet of the Lord. So for those who are focused in on the Smaranam Anga of Bhakti, then it's being said here that Pada Sevanam helps them to perfect their remembrance of the Lord. So for those who are who are taking Smaranam as the main Anga of Bhakti for reaching their perfection, along with Shravanam and Kirtanam, then they may generally choose to accept the Anga of Pada Sevanam because it will help them to attain Samadhi, or the perfection of remembrance, which is called Samadhi. So then this point is being mentioned. So another point being that was underscored here is that the word pada means feet. So it means service to the feet. But the idea isn't that one has to go and just serve the feet of the Lord as such, like go to the deities and all right, start massaging the toes or, bathing them or something. But the word pada refers to an attitude also. The attitude is one of reverence and devotion. So when it says pada sevanam, the sevanam is to be done with a certain attitude. And the word pada indicates that attitude, which is one of reverence and devotion to the Supreme Lord. The feet being the lowest part of the body indicates a sort of humbleness and a type of regard that is very high for the entities whose feet you approach. So then that is indicated by the word pada, this attitude of reverence to the Lord. So seva, pada sevanam should be done according to different times and circumstances. And Prabhupada points out here that when one strictly adheres or particularly adheres to this process, it includes within it other items. What are some of the other items? So Prabhupada mentions those other items here. It includes such things as seeing the form of the Lord. So by coming and take darshan of the Lord, pada sevanam is taking place. Touching the form of the Lord. That you got to be initiated for that one. Circumambulating the form of the temple of the Lord. So usually in many temples, they would have a path you can circumambulate the deity. They have in many temples, you see. Not so much in the West because we kind of just get what we can get, whatever buildings we can get and so on. But especially in India, you'll see that they usually put a path around the deity. So one who circumambulates the deity is also performing this anga of pada sevanam. Also visiting the dhams, such places as Jagannath, Puri, Dwarka, and Mathura, is also included within this anga of pada sevanam. Pada sevanam, one who visits the dhams. Jiva Goswami points out something interesting. He says, for those who live in the dham, though, that is not pada sevanam. He says, those who live in the dham or temple, then that is part of the anga of devotion called surrender. He makes this interesting point that I found fascinating. So if one is living in the temple, then that is itself a practice of Sharanagati. And anyone who lives in a temple can easily understand that. Because living in a temple is not at all easy. Especially living in an Iskcon temple where there are strict standards of sadachar and so on, which many of our devotees don't follow here. You know, like where is Marky? Where is Michael? I know, was he sick or something? Where is Michael? So he's healthy enough to get fruit. Where is Stevie sick? Oh, Michael's doing my pit. All right, valid excuse. Who else is missing in action? Steve is sick. Where is Rohit? Jordan is doing some seva now, isn't he? Joey and Manoj? Okay. Anyway, my point is that to live in the dham, and especially to live in an Iskcon temple, is definitely the practice of Sharanagati, because it is quite challenging. So that's just a side point. Otherwise, visiting the dhams, visiting for some time and going, is also considered part of pada sevanam. Also, worshipping the Ganges and Jamuna, taking bath, and so on. This is also part of pada sevanam. It is mentioned here by Srila Prabhupada and also by Jiva Goswami that because Ganga, Jamuna, and the dhams, they are also devotees of the Lord. Ganga is not just like a river, but Mother Ganga, we say, so she is also a devotee. The dhams have their personifying forms as well. They are also devotees of the Lord. So aside from the dham being devotee and also living entities being devotees, Prabhupada is indicating here and pointing out by Jiva Goswami that rendering service to them can be included within service to devotees. So in other words, by rendering service to the dhams, just by visiting them, taking bath, these are types of services, glorifying the dham, glorifying Mother Ganga and so on, then this is also included within this is also included as Vaishnava Seva. So then the verse quoted by Jiva Goswami in this regard, Shu Shu Shro Shadadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syamaha Sevayat Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevana. Vipra, O Brahmanas. So it's mentioned here, normally the way we hear it translated is, how is it translated? By serving those great souls, Mahat Sevaya, then great service is done, and by such seva, one gets Vasudeva Kataruchi, one gets a taste for Vasudeva Kata. Just like anyone here has a taste for Vasudeva Kata? Probably not. So he raises his hand. Very. We didn't argue. That was not the point we mentioned. Of course, the Bhagavatam is full of glorification and wonderful. But getting taste for the Bhagavatam is not so easy. How many hours of Bhagavatam you read or hear every day? Yeah. Exactly. So getting taste is not so easy. In any case, one gets that taste how? Mahat Sevaya. We normally hear by Mahat Sevaya. But Jiva Goswami also mentions Punya Tirtha, which can also translate as Guru, as it is by Sri Vishwanath in his commentary to this verse. But Punya Tirtha also refers to the holy places. So he's just by, in other words, by Mahat Sevaya or by visiting the holy places, a taste for the narrations of Lord Hari can rise up in the person. And anyone who's ever visited the Dham, at least I've had this experience in visiting Vrindavan, that you get immediately like infused with a type of enthusiasm to hear about the deity of that place, namely Krishna, if you go to Vrindavan, or if you go to Mayapur, Lord Chaitanya, etc. Or if you go to South India, you want to hear about Balaji or whatever the various deities are. You're immediately infused with enthusiasm. If your conscience is not too jacked up, obscured by offenses and so on, then you immediately infused with enthusiasm to hear the narrations glorifying the Ishadevata of that Dham. So Punya Tirtha is its own item for generating taste for the topics of Krishna. Of course, Sutta Goswami says in the first canto that of the two, serving like Ganga and the Tirthas, and of the devotees, preeminence is given to the devotees because the Dhams may gradually purify one, gradually infuse, whereas the devotees can very quickly do it. That anyone can understand by experience that this is the case. So anyway, included within Padasevanam is Tadiya Upasana, worship of Tadiya or those things which have a relationship to Krishna, which includes, Prabhupada's mentioning here, Vaishnavas, Tulsi, Ganga, Jamuna. It also includes the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is also a Tadiya. Therefore you can, just like on the altar we have this, many people think it's a Nrsingadev Shila. Here on the right side of the altar in front of Jagannath, you see, it looks like a Shila. It's actually a Tadiya. It was from a temple of Lord Nrsingadev. Vaisheshika Prabhu apparently brought it here in like the 80s or something. And it's just from an old temple in South India. So it's a Tadiya. So Tadiyas are worshipable. So you can also put the Bhagavatam on the altar. It is also worshipable. Krishna, or it's mentioned by Lord Shiva to his wife, Aradhananam sarvesham Vishnu Aradhanam param tasmat param taram devi tadiyanam samarchanam. This verse is mentioned. That of all forms of worship that can be found in the Vedic literatures, the worship of Vishnu is considered supreme. But superior to that is worship of Tadiya, the Tadiyas of the Lord. Why is the Tadiya considered superior than worship of the Supreme Lord himself? Because they are very dear to the Supreme Lord. And because they are intensely dear to the Supreme Lord, by showing attention to them, you can easily catch up the attention of the Supreme Lord. That's the idea. There's a nice verse also mentioned in regards to the Vaishnava Tadiya. Krishna himself says to Arjuna that those who say they are my devotees are not my devotees, but those who are devotees of my devotees, those are my true devotees. And so the import we heard in this regard, regarding this particular statement, just again underscoring the same point, that the same point being that serving the Tadiya is more powerful than service to the Lord itself because the Tadiya is intensely dear to the Supreme Lord. So in regards to this particular verse from the Adi Purana, it's Krishna speaking to Arjuna. The import I heard to this was that the Supreme Lord himself wants to render service to the devotees. But the devotees are very 100% surrendered to the Supreme Lord. So they did not agree to accept any service from the Supreme Lord. So when some person, fortunate jiva, renders service to that devotee, the Supreme Lord thinks to himself, I wanted to do that seva, but it was disallowed by the devotee. They would not allow me to render service in that way. But somehow you are being, benedicted. You're being given the benediction of rendering that service that I wanted to render. And therefore, you have now become extremely dear to me. So in this way, this is the principle. For those of us who aren't on the platform of bhav and prema, it's not so easy to catch up the attention of the Lord. But if one serves sadhus, then very quickly you can catch up the attention of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord himself mentions this to Daras Muni. where he tells Devras Muni, you think that I am independent? You were thinking like this? Because Devras Muni was being chased by Sudarshan Chakra after offending Ambarish Maharaj. So he went to Lord Brahma. Brahma was like, sorry, you finished, yo. He went to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva also said, I cannot do anything. He went to Lord Narayana. Narayana, I can't do anything. Why are you looking at me? Like, I can do something. Devras Muni said, you only threw the chakra, nah? Can't you call it back? And the Lord said, oh, you think that I am independent? Aham bhakta paradhina aswatantra ivadvija. I don't even remember the verses. This is an impression left in the mind from like several years ago studying this section. Aham bhakta paradhina means that aswatantra ivadvija. Oh, Brahmana, aswatantra, I'm not at all independent. Swatantra means independent. So aswatantra, I'm not at all independent. Why are you thinking like this? Aham bhakta paradhina, I'm completely dependent upon my bhakta. On those sadhus whose hearts are completely purified or completely freed of any trace of misfortune, are so dear to me that even those who are dear to them are very dear to me. Bhakta priyajanaha. Bhakta priyajana, those persons who are bhakta priya, they are dear to those bhaktas, then those persons are dear to me. And this way, we understand the principle of tadiya, and this is also included within padasevanam. This is the purport. Jiva Goswami quotes 2 verses glorifying the power of padasevanam. I'll hold off on those verses. Maybe I can mention it after, but if there's any discussion, I'll just take that first. Yeah.
Thanks, Prabhu, for a really wonderful class. I really liked your point about that pada also refers to an attitude. And so when it says, it seems a little more literal, but when the sentence says, being intensely attached to thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord is also called pada sevanam, is that more literal, like they're actually thinking of the lotus feet all the time? Or is it also more like the attitude of maybe being a servant is intensely in their mind?
Being intensely attached to thinking of the Lord's lotus feet is called padasevanam. My understanding of that statement is just one who adheres to this particular anga of bhakti, as their main alambana, their main support for achieving the goal of Krishna consciousness. That is called padasevanam. Yeah, like that. Otherwise, it would become indistinct from smarnam itself. Mm-hmm. Being intensely attached to thinking of the Lord's lotus feet is part of smarnam also, isn't it? Dhruva Nusmriti, Samadhi, like that dhyana. So that's my understanding of that particular statement. Those who adhere to this anga as their alambana, their support for obtaining Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, that's kind of what my sense was too. It's not like they literally are thinking of the feet all the time, kind of thing. They might, but
Yeah. Any other? Yeah.
Hare Krishna. I was listening to this one lecture by Sachinanda Maharaj, and he was explaining how he was walking past Govardhan one day, and it was kind of...
He was walking?
Past Govardhan. Govardhan one night, and it was kind of late in the evening, and he saw one sadhu, and he felt in his heart this sadhu must be very genuine. So he approached him and asked him, he said, in Hindi, he asked him, what is your sadhana? And the sadhu just said, Naam and Govardhan Darshan. And it got me thinking about how that the way Srila Bhaktisiddhanta preached Gaudiya Vaishnavism in the world, we stress certain other things. We stress Nam Kirtan and multiplicity of services. So it makes you wonder sometimes if, when we read that there's these 9 processes of bhakti, and like, for example, within this padasevanam, someone could make it his main anga to, if he was that advanced, to just meditate on the lotus feet of the Lord, or just live in the Dham and chant. So it seems like a lot of these practices, we necessarily coming in the line from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would not follow.
Why?
You know what I'm saying? I mean, maybe not so intensely. We would more intensely just focus on preaching and Harinam, and and then through that get the revelation of these other things.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a little hard to balance those 2 ideas, because...
Balance what 2 ideas?
That the way we would practice it coming from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and sometimes how these practices are described in the Bhagavatam seem a little bit different,
The the way we would practice these angas coming in the line of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta
Yeah.
is different from the way that we hear them in the scriptures?
Yes.
How so?
No? Okay, maybe it was just my misperception.
Just like Padasevanam is going on daily in the temple. As such, but it's going on. But it's not incumbent upon anyone to make it a focus, particularly Padasevanam or Archanam. It's not incumbent upon practitioners to make that anga, as it is with Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. So, but it is there. You know, probably to be a devotee, you can't get out of doing some level of Padasevanam. But just because it is not focused doesn't mean it's done differently as such. It's just not exactly the focus. But I do tend to think that in our movement, Padasevanam does get quite a bit of attention. You know, aside, of course, in our classes we say Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, but in our practice, it's mostly Padasevanam. Because even doing things like cleaning the dhams, this is all part of Padasevanam. Washing the pots in the dham for the deities, this is all part of Padasevanam also. Also Archanam. So in our practice, we seem to give a lot of attention to Padasevanam and Archanam. Although in our classes, we stress like Kirtan, Shravanam, and so on. But usually, from my observation, the planet Earth over, Shravanam, Kirtanam gets like minimum attention in a day. And Padasevanam, Archanam gets maximum, you know, like that. Anyway, there's no fault in that as such, but in terms of, yeah.
Thanks, Prabhu. I just wanted to share also, I think we do hear a lot of emphasis just on Amaprabhu's question that actually one is constantly remembering the lotus feet of the Lord in a tangible sense, like their actual lotus feet. Like we hear over and over in a lot of prayers. So I just wanted to share that I know devotee also, and I think that does become a relevant practice at a certain stage when actually the lotus feet of the Lord becomes a very prominent aspect of meditation. Is that correct?
Well, like we were hearing yesterday, Smaranam is the gift of Shravanam and Kirtanam. Avishmriti Krishna Padara Vindayo Kshenota Bhajani Tasham Tanoti Satvasa Shuddhim Paramatma Bhaktim Jnana Chavijnana Viraga Yuktam. This is the last verse of the Krishna Katashtakam, and it describes the fruit of Shravanam, Kirtanam. And that fruit is avishmriti, constant remembrance. You can say the lotus feet of the Lord, or the lotus form of the Lord, the rupa, the guna, the lila. It may not just be the feet. I mean, after all, the feet are nice, but Krishna's face is even nicer. Just like Ayandra, he tells one little short anecdote of a devotee inquiring from Srila Prabhupada that when we approach the Bhagavatam, if we have sex desire, we're not to move past the first two cantos. Prabhupada writes that in the second chapter, I think like verse 32, where if you have sex desire, then one who has sex desire shouldn't move past the first two cantos, which are the Lord's lotus feet. So a devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, when we're looking at the deities then, if we have sex desire, should we just, don't move past the feet, oh, offense, like that. And then Srila Prabhupada responds by saying, how can you not look at Krishna's face? Like that. Andrew always finds stuff like that, In any case, so I imagine that their meditation would be not relegated to the feet only, but to the Lord's rupa, his guna, and his lila. After all, Smaranam is of the nam, guna, and lila. So that can be a prominent practice. That's the fruit of their Shravanam and Kirtanam, like that. That doesn't. Of course, that statement doesn't explain the sentence, which was the context of the question. What is the sense of the sentence? And we're trying to understand how it's distinct from Smaranam. So then the sense of the statement is that those who, and that's how Jiva Goswami writes it in the Sandarbhas also, those who are taking Padasevanam as their main practice. So that was the sense in which we took that sentence. Otherwise, it becomes indistinct from Smaranam, like that. So your point is fine. It didn't answer the question, though, in terms of the context in which it was presented. That's all. Any other points, questions, comments? Oh, yeah. Vandanam is offering obeisances. Vandanam means offering obeisances, and it also means offering prayers. So we'll hear about that when we get to Vandanam, offering obeisances to the Lord. Anything else? Any other question? Yeah. Dang, yo, this sun is like intense. We need like a shade or something.
The Krishna's lotus feet and Radharani's lotus feet, they all have these auspicious markings on them.
Yes.
And do you know what some of those markings mean? Just curious.
Not off the top hand. I have books, and I have studied them, several years ago, but I don't remember all the meanings of the markings on Krishna's lotus feet. Any other question? All right, then we're It's doing good. No, it's all right. I can tolerate. Tom Jatiksha Subharata, no problem. All right. There are two verses that Jiva Goswami quotes just describing the power of Padasevanam. They're very simple verses, actually. Do you want to hear them, or shall we carry on? The first verse is from Prithu Maharaj's prayers to Lord Vishnu. 4:21:31. That was a nice verse. Yapada seva burichis tapasvinam ashesha janmo pachitam malam diya sadyakshanotyanwaham medati sati yata padan kushta vinishrita sarit. You all have your phones. You can look up the verse also if you want. 4:21:31. So it says Yapada seva abhiruchis. That means persons who are abhiruchis, they have taste. Taste for what? Padasevanam. Tapasvinam. Tapasvinam means the ascetics. So the ascetics who have taste for this Padaseva. And Tapasvinam in Prabhupada's translation, and Jiva Goswami's comment in Bhakti Sandarbha also, the word Tapasvinam refers to persons who have experienced the pangs of material existence. And they're referred to as, literally Tapasvinam means ascetics. I remember reading, I think also in the 4th canto, maybe it's to this verse. No, I think it's in 422, but Srila Prabhupada says that materialists are also tapasvis. He writes like that, because for pursuing matter, you gotta be austere. There's no question of lack of austerity. Like devotees, we with austerity, we can take it or leave it. But when you're after material sense enjoyment, you can't leave it. You got to take it. And, like devotees, we may or may not get up for the Mangalarti, But many times when you rise early, you see that so many cars are already going to work. So they are also tapasvis. So the word tapasvina means those who have experienced the pangs of material existence. If they, padaseva abhiruchis, they develop taste for this padaseva, then what happens? Ashesha janma upachitam malamdiya. The mind, which is ashesh, diya means mind here, is translated as mind, which is ashesha malam. Ashesha malam means filled with unlimited nastiness, dirt in the mind. How many of us have a lot of nastiness in the mind? Even during the Bhagavatam class. Ashesha malam means impurity. And how has this impurity come in the mind like that? So heavy. Just like when we want to remember something Krishna conscious, we gotta really strain we're just like after the class gets over, what was the class about? We have to really strain them. But when we have to remember something abominable, it just sits there so nicely, So you're japa time, boom. And it doesn't go away. Why does that happen? Janma upachitam, because it's been accumulated over many, many births. This nastiness in the mind. Over many, many births it has come up. And therefore the mind is filled with so much junk. But for persons who have gotten that taste for padaseva, then it says here, sadya shnoti anwaham etati sati. Then immediately, kshnoti, this nastiness in the mind is destroyed. Anwaham edati means increasingly, day after day. Anwaham means day after day. So day after day, and increasingly so, there is destruction of the impurity in the mind. Then an example is given, Yata pada grushta vinishrita sarit. It is just like the waters that are coming down from Mother Ganga, from the lotus feet of the Lord. Padan Gushta means the lotus feet of the Lord. So the Ganga is, the Lord's toe, pierced the universe. It's a powerful toe. And it pierced the covering of the universe, and then came the waters of the causal ocean. That is Ganga. So that water purifies anyone who takes bath in Ganga. So in the same way, those who have developed this taste for Padasevanam, then immediately there becomes destruction of the impurities in the mind. And day after day they are doing edity, then more and more increasingly so. Therefore you'll see that many times when devotees do come, as I was mentioning before, because Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam is the natural expression of bhakti, then it is rarely obtained. Surdulabha. Just like bhava's prema is surdulabha, rarely obtained. So because the natural expression of bhava and prema is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam is also rarely obtained. Therefore, being totally transcendental processes, people have a hard, we as practicing devotees struggle with these processes. Getting taste for the process is not so easy because it is surdurla, but it's very rarely obtained. So you'll find that in the beginning that we do engage devotees in Padasevanam a lot. Why? Because it purifies. Just like Mother Ganga's power to purify, because the waters are coming from the lotus feet of the Lord. So also this Padasevanam purifies their being and supports their Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. At least it's meant to support. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we hear that the entrance point is Shravanam, but you can really you can't really do all of them. Like Archanam can be done. Sakyam, Atmanivedanam, that can be done. Vandanam can be done. But when one is interested in bhakti progress, then Shravanam is really the entry point for that. Otherwise, it becomes like the accumulation of bhakti sukriti, which is nice, but that alone will not help one achieve the goal of life. So in this way, Shravanam, for persons who are about to die, that means you have to appreciate that you're about to die. And that, is there a goal of my life? One has to become so inquisitive about it. Just like I often mention this recently, that part of asking questions is not just asking questions to the speaker, but like Parikshit Maharaj, a part of his inquiry process is going to the Ganga and fasting until death. That was part of the inquiry process. It wasn't just like this is mentioned in Bhagavad Sandarbha, I read it. It was very fascinating. So that's part of the inquiry. So that sort of intensive inquiry, and at that time he was asking, what should a person hear? What should a person chant? What should a person remember? With that intensity of inquisitiveness, it wasn't just an intellectual exercise, just like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta speaks about that in one essay. That because, he says, particularly persons with a Western education, he calls us out specifically, he says, then they are at liberty, they feel themselves at liberty to ask questions without ever really feeling the necessity to follow anything that is being told. And he gives the reason for that. The reason he says is because the spiritual disease does not evince itself antagonistically, apparently so, as much as the physical diseases do. So he says when you get a physical disease, it is apparent to everyone that you have to go to the doctor, pose the question for the solution, and you have to follow it. It's obvious because I got a disease, I'm dying. But the spiritual disease is of a nature that it eclipses itself and does not allow for appreciation of its perniciousness. So in this way, although one is having spiritual disease, you pose question to the Sadhu Vaidya. It's like, Brahmite, hai, Sadhu Vaidya pai. Mahaprabhu says after going Brahmite, traveling all over this cosmos, you may become fortunate to meet a Sadhu Vaidya. Vaidya means physician or doctor. Sadhu, a doctor, who can solve your disease. But you're just questioning very nonchalant, no gravity, no intensity. yeah, I was having a question about, so-and-so, and you pose a question, the sadhu does answer it. Yeah, the answer, thank you. There's no intensity of the necessity for the Shreya Uttama, my highest potential. For those who are feeling that necessity, then Shravanam is really the entry point. Tasma Gurum Prapadyeta, Jignasu Shreya Uttama. I also mention this quite often. The word tasmad means therefore. Therefore what? You don't open up a sentence with therefore. Therefore what? Therefore, after appreciating the futility of heavenly and earthly sense enjoyment, that's a context in which that word tasmad is used in chapter 3 of the 11th canto. After realizing that all this stuff is useless in the material world, from top to bottom, Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravatinarjuna, then Guru Prapadyeta, you should take shelter of the Guru. Then what type of questions you will have? Jignasu. Then you should pose questions to the Guru. About what? Shreya Uttama. About my highest potential as a living entity. That sort of question. But that sort of question is very hard to come up if you haven't appreciated that this whole material existence is more or less useless. It's asat, it's insubstantial. For those who get that realization, Shravanam is the entry point. But oftentimes, other than that, you need a little purification. You might have to increase your Sukriti to hear and chant. So then, Padasevanam, Vandanam. Like sometimes you see people come to the Sunday feast for the first time, and somehow you get them dancing in the kirtan. That makes them very favorable. You get them dancing, they start jumping, and because the devotees, we jumping, and they're like, all right, and they start jumping, and then when the kirtan gets over, we all, hit the deck. And then you see them also, almost as if beyond their control. And they also hit the deck. And that way, then after that, the class is given. Then they may feel, the heart may have softened a little bit, and they get some inclination. Such is the power of Padasevanam. So that was one verse quoted. That's verses from Pretu. There are a few other verses, but I'm going to stop here unless there's any final thing. Yeah. I know I said there are several verses actually. I'm going to stop here though. But you want to? Yeah. Perfect souls. Yeah, it means I maybe by achieve perfection. No, there's two ways of attaining perfection. One way of attaining perfection is you didn't have perfection and you attained it. And another way of attaining it is you had it beginninglessly. Just like everyone in the spiritual world, have they attained perfection? What is the answer to that question? Have they attained perfection? They have attained perfection, beginninglessly though, with no beginning, because they're eternal. So eternal objects have no beginning, no end. So they've attained perfection. And there are others who have attained perfection by sadhana. So they were beginninglessly ignorant of Krishna, and then they attained perfection. So there's two types of attainment. So then the idea here of attaining is these personalities exemplify these particular angas of bhakti, like that. They've attained perfection in that way. That's my understanding of that. Yeah.
Just a clarification. When you said in the spiritual world they're beginninglessly, perfect, what about the sadhakas who have achieved the spiritual world?
What about them?
Wouldn't that mean they had a beginning to their entering the spiritual world?
Yeah, certainly. Okay. So that's one. That's why we said that's another way of attaining.
So yeah.
But it's not like you go to the spiritual world. Are you a sadhaka siddha, sadhana siddha, or a nitya siddha? Yeah. One true siddha is siddha. So once you're in the spiritual world, one is siddha. But there are two types of siddhas. Three types really mentioned by Rupa Goswami. One is who's attained siddha eternally. They're called as nitya siddhas. That means they've been beginninglessly siddha. The other is sadhana siddhas who have attained siddha from the state of bondage. And the others are kripa siddha who have attained siddha from the state of bondage simply by mercy. The distinction between sadhana siddha and kripa siddha is that one attains siddha by sadhana, and then by one sadhana, then kripa is always required to get the final attainment. It is not that just by sadhana you come barging into the spiritual world. Understand that you're sadhana. Everyone needs kripa to attain that final perfection. But the idea is that by sadhana you've moved through the various stages of bhajan, kriya, nishta, ruchi, asakti. And then when your asakti has become very deep, then Krishna, by his kripa, awards the final installment of mercy. That's bhava. And with kripa siddha means you didn't go through those stages of sadhana bhakti, and you got to perfection somehow or other. Such a, Gaur Lila is filled with such examples of, jivas, he just looked at them and boom, or he embraced them and said, Hari, Hari, and then, and they got it. That is kripa siddha. So that means no progress to the various stages. But that is an atypical exception to the rule. The general rule is that you progress through the various stages up to a sakti. And then when your sakti becomes very deep, then the final gift is bhava and then prema. Of course, our sadhana is also a gift. That is also mercy. It is the mercy of the initial sadhu sangha that allow for that to take place. So I think of mercy in installments. And there's a shastric reason for that also. Beginning in the 88th chapter of the 10th canto, mercy is actually spoken of as installments. First installment is Krishna takes away everything you like gradually. Yas yaham anugarit nami hari shaitandanam shanai. You like this one? You really attached to that? All right. Let me take that off. You really, and then you cry and you're miserable. And then you're like, well, at least I have this. Oh, you really like that, huh? So this is called the first installment of Krishna's mercy. And then after that, part of this first installment is that no one likes you after that. And, all the relatives, friends, oh, you ain't got no money? So they don't like you after that. So then what is the second installment? I don't remember. I didn't commit these verses to memory, actually. After this verse, and the next verse describes how after that, being deprived of any mundane shelter, then one is able to take sadhu sangha seriously. Otherwise, either you have no sadhu sangha, or you see sadhus and you don't care for them so much, you don't take them so seriously. But after that first installment of mercy, then the second installment of mercy is you're able to perceive the sadhus in a new light as my shelter. And then the third installment of mercy is prema, like this. So I'd like to think of mercy as installment. So sadhana is the first installment of Krishna's mercy through sadhu sangha. And then after that, the final installment is bhava and prema, like that. Yeah, final thing.
Hare Krishna. I don't know where I heard this, so feel free to just smash it. But I thought I heard that in some leelas, like maybe in the rasa dance, only the nitya siddhas were allowed to participate in like certain aspects of that leela.
Yeah,
is that true?
there's anyway, that's a big topic also. But there's like Maharas. Maharas will include also various sadhana siddhas. And then there's other aspects of Rasa that pertain to only the eternal associates.
So Krishna does make a distinction between his eternal associates.
Well, in the Bhoma Leelas.
In the Bhoma, okay.
In the Bhoma Leelas. But because the sadhana siddhas, they take birth in the Bhoma Leelas for further training. So they're not fully trained up. That's why the Bhoma Leelas are there. Because Krishna ain't gonna let anyone up in Golok. There's a distinction between Golok and Gokul. Gokul refers to the Bhoma Leelas. Golok, Krishna has a strict standard, he's strict. Lord Chaitanya, a little loose, a little liberal. Krishna's the conservative, Lord Chaitanya's a liberal. Anyway, that was a side joke. But Krishna has a very strict standard for Golok, Leela. So in Bhoma Leelas of Krishna and Gokul pastimes, the sadhana siddhas are there for further training. So there is distinction in the Bhoma Leelas, but once you Golok, like that. All right. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jaya.
Daily